Good afternoon. My name is Brett Muzzy. I'm a Director of Program Management in the Surface Engineering team. Really happy to be here with you guys today. One of my teams and some of the guys on my team are on the Commercial Engineering team, which is a new team for Surface, a device that started out as a consumer-focused device. And I have been putting the bug in the business's ear that maybe we should really focus on making IT happy and getting into corp and enterprise. And so, yeah, thank you. So hopefully we're in the right direction. And today we'll be talking through some of what my team does and showing you some tips and tricks on how to deploy on the Surface. So a little bit about some of my teams. I own a team that is responsible for post-launch engineering, which is after we sell a device, and it's the updates that we put out for that device, the targeted updates. And then there's a commercial team, which, like I said, is an upstart. I was the founding member and really sort of tortured the org into listening to me and saying things like UEFI matter, things around remote management of devices matters. And those changes have started to push in. Those are updates that have been made available for the Pro 3. Things like asset tagging were not in the original device. Those went in after the fact. That came out of my team. So any kind of improvement you're seeing on the devices after you've purchased them come out of my team. And some of those changes are now happening as the devices are being prototyped and brought up. So, a lot of the changes that we make in the product after it's sold are driven by data. Some of them are driven by our crazy ideas, but a lot of them are driven by complaints, are driven by returns, are driven by crash data. We look at just about every piece of data that we can around why a device is coming back to us. Because I want everyone to, like a device, buy a device, be happy with that device. And if I can make that device better for them after they buy it, all the better. I always like that, especially if it's free. So, like I said, we look at a tremendous amount of data and how to balance it and how to juggle it. That's resulted in us doing, at least with Pro 3, we were doing updates initially about every 2 weeks, which I know is not everyone in this room's favorite thing to hear. But what it allowed us to do was really quickly bring the quality up on some focused points that we were having some initial problems with. And then we made those updates available for you guys to actually put in your images so that if you were trying to deploy on a Pro 3, you had all those fixes, your customers would never see those issues. So, like I said, right now we look back at Pro 3 because out of our devices it's been a very successful selling device. It's had a very warm reception in Corp. And some of the things that really bit us right off the bat, things that weren't great, were things like Wi-Fi. And we know that with a device like this, that when you don't have Wi-Fi, or LTE for that matter, when you don't have Wi-Fi, you're pretty much done. You can play solitaire for only so long, but you're not doing your job anymore. So we built a huge test suite in my team to test Wi-Fi. We built up from 6 APs that were originally used to test and move Pro 3 to retail to over 120. And we continue to build that number of APs that we're using. We've got about 20 of them are AP class. We work really closely with the AP manufacturers. And then we move that testing back into the programs that are still under development. We've heard feedback around Connected Standby. It was new in Windows 8 with live tiles, and your device could have the screen off, and you could still be getting content. You would still hit a Wi-Fi access point. And that was really new. There's like 1 or 2 other devices that have really made use of Connected Standby outside of Surface. We're Windows' first and best customer around Connected Standby, and we helped them find some bugs in it. And so did you guys, thank you. So that's been an area that we had to focus on, and we work really very closely with not only our Wi-Fi manufacturer, but also with Windows to make it so that crashes or resume issues or having Hyper-V installed on a Pro 3, things that were initially problem areas, are all resolved. We put all workarounds in so that developers who want to use Hyper-V can on a Pro 3 still have the benefits of Connected Standby. And then we worked with Windows to make sure that any other OEM, just besides ourselves, wouldn't hit these issues as well. Enterprise applications, like I said, we're a relatively new team in Surface. So Surface really doesn't test McAfee or AnyConnect. They don't even know what those are. My team does. My team has a really good idea. I have a test team that we're building out. We're actually doing app compat testing with apps that we typically find in enterprise, things that are new to the Surface organization. Those happened with Pro 3 after launch. Those happened with Surface 3 pre-launch. So we're learning from our mistakes on Pro 3 with this IT audience, because we want to make sure that you guys don't have to be our testers. That's not your job. You have enough in front of you with Windows 10 and everything else. Firmware driver updates. So this is one that is a bit of a mixed blessing. So I and my team are really, like I said, we look at the data and we push fixes out. Not every OEM does that. A lot of OEMs are really content with selling to the device and washing their hands and moving on to the next rev, which is easy for you. You don't have any updates to push out to that device. That device also gets no better than the day that you bought it. Mine does. So I make sure that when I hear complaints from channel, when I hear complaints from commercial, from customers, if there's a software fix that I can do or I can work with a customer, we do that. And then we make that fix available. I have lots of other work to do than just push fixes out. So if I'm ever pushing a fix out, which we do monthly for the most part, sometimes we skip a month when we don't have anything, I'm not going to push it out to you guys. So I get the question, how critical is it that I take an update? I would recommend taking it. Yeah, it would be a good idea to take the updates. You get things like fewer Wi-Fi crashes. You get better battery life. You get a better performing device. Sometimes, like I said, we'll add functionality to the UFI that lets you do things like we did in March, where you can disable and enable the USB ports or the camera. So when we put out the updates, and I think Joao is going to talk about that a little bit, you can see how we've worked to make them easier for you to push out. And then we've worked really closely with Windows. So in Windows 10, our updates will be available automatically through WSUS and SCCM, something that they're not today. So like I said, looking forward at Surface 3 and at Windows 10, we've been working with Windows since Windows 10's first build came out. And Surface 3 had been in the works as many hardware programs for about 18 months at that point. We're always working on a hardware program that's far out. So working with Windows and working with Intel on a new chipset were both huge investments for us and big for my team, because we really were there from the get-go. And we influenced the design of the device. It was originally conceived to be a 32-bit device, and we changed that from the commercial side. It was originally not spec'd to have 4 gigs of RAM, and I changed that too. So my team is having influence over the products that Surface is building today. It's having that same influence to a greater degree with devices that are still on the drawing board for tomorrow. The Wi-Fi testing, the issues that people, I'm sure, read about on Pro 3 around Pro 3 launch. Surface 3 passed all the Wi-Fi testing that Pro 3 can pass today. It actually has a better Wi-Fi design based on things that testing turned up. So Surface 3 Wi-Fi will maintain a better connection and have none of the bugs that Pro 3 had at launch. That's a cool statement, because we didn't have to do any additional work other than run it through the same automation that we built for Pro 3. That happens now on every program that we build. Additionally, we're doing the same thing for monitors. We had a lot of feedback from customers that DisplayPort chaining, issues with screen resolution out of the dock, those are all things that we built a test pass around as well. We own an awful lot of monitors at this point. We listen to you guys for what monitors you're buying and having trouble with. We work closely with Dell and other monitor manufacturers to figure out if they're having revision issues in their firmware. We found some. We found some issues on our front. We found some issues that Intel needed to make in their display driver. So we're continuing to focus a lot of investment around devices and accessories that are likely going to be in an enterprise. Things that consumer, not quite as likely. Things that were really deprioritized by the rest of Surface. So we're filling that gap today. LTE. So LTE is a often heard request. It's not falling on deaf ears. It's just there's actually more to it than just dropping LTE into a device. I'd be happy to talk with people afterwards about some of that fun. I am happy to say, though, that Surface 3 does have an LTE offering. I have one in my bag. It's awesome. It's going through certification at this point. It's going to be out in the next number of weeks. It's a great device, and with LTE, it's all the more powerful. And then as my team continues to take your feedback around just about everybody asking for LTE, I suspect that we'll start to see it in more and more of our offerings as well. Surface 3 has the same update and deployment model that we had with Pro 3. We view that as a good thing, and Joao and Milad are going to talk more about that. There are definitely some tricks, especially if people are new to Windows 8 deployment. Things get a little bit easier in Windows 10 and a little bit different. We've got some nuance, and we want to make sure that we're trying to impart some of that knowledge to you guys, because we do want to make sure that when you buy our devices, that they're easy to roll out, that you understand what they're doing, and you're happy with the end result. And then, just so that it's absolutely, completely clear, all of the Pro offerings, Pro 1, 2, 3, and Surface 3, all fully support Windows 10. You can update them today if you haven't already. You can even roll them back if you then want to go back to 8. We've been working very closely with Windows at this point to flesh out any bugs we're finding. We've also added new feature requests. The request to turn off Connected Standby is one that's new in Windows 10. That's in the new self-host builds that we're running internally. I think that's in the next public flight. So things that come out of this audience in particular are things that we're bringing back to the whole company. So I want to thank you guys for that. And I want to introduce Joao, who's going to talk about deploying surfaces.
Thanks, Britt. How's that for honesty? Pretty good one. So I'm here to talk to you about other things. I'm going to talk about the current state. Milad is then talking about the future, what's coming over with Windows 10, how do you deploy, how do you manage your devices. I'm going to talk to you about what you can do right now, what you can do right now with your devices. Let me tell you one thing. For the Surface team, when we came over, their goal was we produce the best possible image that you can have on your device. So why the hell would someone put their own image on this device? Anyone here deploying their own devices, putting their own image? Oh, pretty much everyone. How funny is that? So I'm here to tell you a little bit about the optimizations that we put inside of our image and how can you do those optimizations by yourself and bring that into all of your devices. Our image is still pretty good, though. Let me tell you about some deployment recommendations. The very first one is regarding drivers. A lot of people have experienced issues with drivers. And this is not exclusive to Surface Pro 3. The thing is, when you're using a deployment solution, when you're building your images, when you're using MDT or Configuration Manager, sometimes you just put all of your drivers in a pool and you say, I'll let Windows or I'll let this application pick the best drivers for you. Guess what? The applications, the drivers that they pick are not always the best drivers for you. So we strongly recommend filtering those drivers and making sure that you're getting the drivers that were made specifically for your device. And I'll show you why. I have demos of all of this. Another thing is to add packages for things like hibernation, firmware installation, quick note-taking. Those are 3 KB articles that you'll see. The first one for hibernation and the second one for firmware installation, it's actually for faster firmware installation. For when you deploy your firmware updates, you can get them faster. All of those are Windows updates. If you're using a reference image, you're probably already including those Windows updates if you get them from WSUS. If not, we strongly recommend putting those 3 little things into that image. The last one that says quick note-taking, it's one that you don't need if you're using Office 365 or if you have a fairly recent version of Office. But otherwise, you should deploy that MSI as well, or actually, that's a cab file, because that's the one that allows you to press the purple button and open OneNote on your device automatically. Without that update, that's just not going to happen. Another thing is, Brett just talked to you about Connected Standby and all the wonders of Connected Standby. From my experience, what I've seen is that our customers, when they put a device to sleep, which means Connected Standby in our world, what they get is the device will drain about 1% of battery life per hour. What does that mean? It means that you put your device to sleep if you haven't updated, if you haven't put this additional thing that I'm going to show you. You put your device to sleep on a Friday, and the next Monday, 48 hours later, a little bit more than that, what you'll get is the battery is 50% lower than what you have when you put your device to sleep. So what we've added to our image is the capability of your device going into hibernation and using absolutely no power after being in sleep mode, after being in connected standby for 4 hours. This is a big benefit, and it's something that we recommend everyone. So if you left your device unattended, if you've left your device in connected standby for 4 hours, that means you're probably enjoying a beer. You're probably in happy hour at a party or at home. You're not needing your device. So we strongly recommend that it goes into hibernation. And by the way, we use Eufy, so resuming from hibernation or booting your device from scratch takes a few seconds. It takes less than 7 to 10 seconds in most cases. Another thing that we've just added, and this is one more thing that comes out of our team, is enable Eufy management from the OS. So Brett talked about all of those great capabilities. Some customers require that the camera be disabled. Some customers require that you cannot use the SD card. We're disabling that directly within the bus. There's no communication inside of the device. There's nothing like that. So it's not the OS blocking anything. It's being blocked directly in the firmware of the device. It's as if that component was not there. But that's great. When you want to disable on 1 or 2 devices, you just grab the device and go into the Eufy menu and do disable those things. There was a demo this morning. But when you want to do that at scale, there's 2 things that you need to do. The first one is you need to install an MSI that puts the hooks into the operating system, so that enables the operating system to communicate with the Eufy. And the second one is really to communicate that information. And we wanted to make that as flexible as possible. And for that reason, what we've provided is a framework. We have essentially a .NET assembly that you can call from your own applications, from a script, from any given amount of solutions, so that you can do that at deployment time, so that you can build that into your workflow. Last but not least, the other thing that I'm going to demo is how to install the Surface app. We've received the requests from a lot of customers that wanted to check out the Surface app, and I'm going to show you what it's for. But that Surface app, what it allows you to do is, if you're a creative professional, if you're using the pen, some people will like more sensitive to the pen, more sensitivity. Some other people will like less sensitivity. It really depends on how you use your device, how you use the pen. It's also great for help desk. So when someone asks you, what's the serial number of your device? There's no easy way, besides going to MS-Info32 and going along all of those lines, there's no easy way for a user to tell you what's the serial number. So we've realized that a lot of people want to deploy the Surface app that contains all of that information and all of those capabilities. And for that reason, we made the Surface app available so that you can install it at deployment time. And I'll also show you how to bring that image, that application, inside of your deployment infrastructure. Right now, I'm just going to show you what the Surface app looks like. So when you open the Surface app, it just says Surface in the start screen, and what you see is this. So you see a big screen, get the most out of your Surface. That's exactly the goal of this application. And then you'll see some additional components like pen pressure sensitivity. And you have here the option, you'll see a slider, and this slider allows you to change the curve, to change how the pressure sensitivity is acknowledged by the pen. This is very, very important for some creative professionals. Other things is the pen top button. Does it open the OneNote, the modern app, the universal Windows app, or does it open the OneNote in the desktop? Because some of you will prefer to use one or another. So we give you the option of changing that setting very, very easily over here in the Surface app. Another thing is the Windows button. So if you're using your tablet in portrait mode and you're drawing inside of your app, maybe your hand will touch the Windows button. Maybe you want to disable that button. In the past, the only option that you had to disable this was to go to Device Manager and disable the driver. That's not the best solution, is it? So we've built that into the app as well. And by the way, when you think that the Surface team at Microsoft only makes hardware, that's absolutely not true, because this app and many others come directly from our team. So this is just one more example. And of course, you have a lot of information. You have some user education videos. You have the option to provide feedback to Microsoft. And you have information about your device that you can use and that you can ask your users to provide to you at any point in time. So let me go back to my device here and give you a quick demo of what we can do. So the very first thing is, this is a deployment share, and by the way, this is highly experimental. So I have a Surface 3 running. Who says that Atom processors are not powerful? I'm running this VM out of my Surface 3. This is my Surface 3, running Hyper-V, running a server with the HCP, the NS, with Contoso, the main controller, with all of those things that you usually have. It's not the fastest VM. It's not the fastest server you can have in your organization. That's definitely not the device that you want to have for a server class in your situation, in your company. But it does work. And let me show you this. So this is my traditional deployment share. Right now, some of you in the back are possibly having challenges seeing this. So the only thing that I want to show you is that this is a traditional deployment share with applications. So I already have Office loaded here. I have operating systems. And as part of the operating systems, what I have is I have Windows 8.1 that is here ready to go. Out-of-box drivers, I have absolutely no drivers loaded. So I just told you that the best option is to filter drivers. Let me show you how do you filter those drivers. The very first step is to make sure that the machine make and model match exactly what you see in MS-Info32. So if I go to the start screen and I go to run MS-Info32, what you'll see in here is that this says System Manufacturer, Microsoft Corporation, System Model Surface 3. So I want to make sure that I create the folder structure just like this. You can also add the operating system or other things if you want to target multiple deployment systems. But what I'm going to create here is that exact folder structure. So I can say Microsoft Corporation. It must match exactly what you saw in MS-Info32. So I'm creating this folder, and then I'm going to create one more. So I'm going to create here a new folder. I'm going to say Surface 3, just like we saw. Okay? So I have this. And when I've created the folder, I have also downloaded the driver pack. This is not an automated process. This is something that you'll want to go to your device, and let me show you exactly how to do this. It's a single website that contains all of this information. So there's a website that says Surface Software, Firmware, and Drivers. And if you go here to details, you'll see a lot of things available. So you'll see the drivers for the Ethernet adapter. You'll see the Surface Firmware tool that is the one that allows you to then configure UEFI settings through the OS. You have the zip files with drivers for both Surface Pro 1, 2, 3, and Surface 3 will be available this afternoon. You also have the Asset Tag tool. You have the KB articles that I talked about. They're all here and ready to go. And you also have some MSI packages that I'm going to tell you about in the future, or just after this demo. The MSI packages are all about making it easier and easier for you to update your drivers. So right here, I've created this, and I've already downloaded the drivers. So if I go to Import Drivers, I choose the directory here. And the directory where I place these drivers is quite simply lab. And so I can go to Surface Drivers, and you can see, in this case, they're Surface Pro 3 drivers. You'll see the same structure under the Surface 3 drivers once we make them available. And let me zoom in once again. What you'll see is that now we have one folder with drivers and another one with firmware. At deployment time, you probably don't want to be updating the firmware. You want to update the firmware just after deployment. By pushing that MSI is probably the best solution. So when you look at this driver folder, this is the only thing that you want to import. So you just pick that folder, press OK, say that you want to import the drivers even if they're duplicate, because let's imagine that Surface Pro 3 and Surface 3, and it's just not your imagination. It's something that really happens. They use the same Wi-Fi drivers. So if they use the same Wi-Fi drivers, if you didn't check that box, it wouldn't import the drivers for Surface 3 after you already have your drivers for Surface Pro 3. But you want to have both because you're filtering into a specific folder. You're saying, MDT, when deploying Windows, I just want to look for Surface Pro drivers inside of that folder. So here I go. I'm importing the drivers. Next, next. It's going to be finished very, very soon. Don't blame it on Surface 3. This is slow on every machine. You can blame it on the VM, maybe, not on Surface 3. So as soon as the drivers are done, the next thing that I'm going to import is the packages. As you can see in MDT, you also have the packages. And then the last thing that I want to import is two applications. One, the Surface app. Two, the Surface firmware tools. And that's it. We'll be ready to go as soon as we have that. Just creating a task sequence, making an additional change or two if necessary, but I'll show you how to proceed with that. Come on. Just needed some encouraging here. Let me try to understand the question. I said that this was experimental, and you're asking what's different here? Where do you get the deployment workbench? Excellent question. Deployment Workbench is the main tool on MDT, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. That's a step that I left out. And if you want to see this deployment from beginning to end, all of these processes, all of these things that you have to do to get the perfect image on Surface Pro 3, they're available in our hands-on lab area. You have a bench there full of Surface Pros, Surface Pro 3, Surface 3. You can sit down and go through the lab step by step and see how to do all of this. So deployment really from scratch. No MDT installed, no server roles, no PXE booting, nothing is available yet. You just go there and do it all from scratch. In the end, you'll end up with an infrastructure that is ready to deploy both Surface Pro 3 and Surface 3. Both Windows 8.1, Windows 10, we have it all there for you to try. So the drivers are in. I do exactly the same thing for the packages, except I don't need to filter, because those packages are mostly Windows packages and Office packages, so there's no need to filter anything. So let me just import the OS packages, go to Browse, once again, same folder, C drive, and here in Lab, I already have a folder called Packages. So next, and the packages are in. The packages, that's an excellent question. Where do I get these packages from? These packages that I've just imported, and right now we're looking at the drivers, but I'll show you the packages. The packages are also on that web page that I just showed you. So the page where we have all the downloads, all the drivers, and all the firmware tools for Surface Pro 1, 2, 3, and Surface 3. So here you'll see all the three packages that I've imported. Here they are. Just traditional Windows updates and one hotfix, that's the one for Office. Then the applications, I can go and just right-click and say New Application. In New Application, I have the options of application with source files or application that is elsewhere in the network. What's the difference? The application with source files means we're going to copy all the source files, all the installers for this application. We're going to copy them to the deployment share, so then we can copy them to the machine that we're deploying. Application without source files means you already have an executable elsewhere in the network, and you just want to execute that thing that is far away. You don't want to bring it over and install it locally. So those are the two options. I'm going to do the application with source files, and right here, I'm going to add a modern app, actually. So I'm going to say the publisher is Microsoft, and this is purely for your own organization. Like when I name these things, this is just for you to recognize the application once it's imported. So the application name is actually the Surface app. Once again, just use something that you recognize. Source directory, I have downloaded the Surface app. It's currently not in the same place, but it's on TechNet, and it has detailed instructions on how to do this entire process that I'm doing here. So here I'm going to Lab, Surface app, OK, ready to import. And it asks me about the location, the name of the directory that will be created, and where this application is being stored, and the command line that I use to run this application. I showed you that this is a universal Windows application. This is a different type of application. So the application installation is not just running setup.exe. We're trying to make this as easy as possible, but right now, what we still have is we have to go through the full command for installing modern applications. Let me show you what it is. I have it actually on my desktop. So let me go there. Oh, Sorry, click the wrong thing. And maybe it's not on the desktop, but on the lab folder. So Surface app, and I have here notes, the notes that I had for installation. This is the command. This is DISM. It's the utility that we use to load any modern application, any universal Windows application. So let me go back here, new application wizard, just pasting this, and once again, this is all detailed on TechNet. It's just copy it from TechNet and paste it there, one-time deal, done. So next, and the application is imported. That's how easy it is. The application is now ready to be deployed when you deploy your image, when you deploy your device. Let me show you how to add another one. So if I go to new application, once again, the application with source files, and right here I'm saying that this is the Surface firmware tools. So adding the Surface firmware tools is equally as easy, except that it's an MSI, so it requires less commands. So I go here, and I have the Surface firmware tools. Actually, no, I don't have the Surface firmware tools because it was still not available when I created this VM. And I'm sorry for that, but that's just an MSI. So you just do MSI exec dot MSI exec, and then you specify the name of the MSI /quiet. That's it. The application is then automatically installed. Sorry for this glitch. Let me show you something else. That is how to bring this all together. And this is all brought together using the task sequence. The task sequence, for those of you that don't know MDT or Configuration Manager, task sequence is kind of the workflow. It's the one that says, let's format the disk, then install the operating system, then install the drivers, then do this, do that. Like all of those commands are here. So task sequence ID can be anything that I can relate to. So in this case, I'm just going to call it Surface deploy. And the task sequence name should be Surface deployment, Windows 8.1 maybe. Anything that describes this task sequence with some keywords that I will understand. Right here, what you'll see as soon as I zoom in is that the default option is standard client task sequence. This is a client operating system. We're definitely not deploying a server, so that's exactly what I want. I want a default client task sequence, the default thing to deploy Windows client to this device. So let me go ahead with this default client task sequence. Select the OS. I'll need to choose what operating system I want to deploy, and in this case, it's Windows 8.1. Specify a product key. I don't want to set up a product key right now. It will automatically activate through KMS. If you have a specific key that you want to use to activate this operating system, just put it over here, and it will be automatically taken. OS settings, you can put your full name of the user that will receive it, the organization, let's call it Surface. It could be anything at all, and the default Internet Explorer homepage. You can also supply an administrator password and say what is going to be the administrative password for all of your devices that are deployed using this process. So right here, I can type anything like the super secret password 1. And let's go again. Confirm the password. Next. Progress. There we go. Here we go. We have a task sequence that is ready. At this point, we're completely ready to start deploying operating systems. We're completely ready to deploy Windows 8.1 to Surface Pro 3. There's a few optimizations that I still want to do. One of them is, I told you that I would filter the drivers, right? It doesn't happen automatically by just defining the folder structure. Let me show you how this happens. I can go to the task sequence. I have two different options. I'll show you both. So if I go to the task sequence and I say properties, and here I look at task sequence, it's loading all the different steps that are going to happen. So we initialize, then we do some validation, make sure that this is the device that we really want to deploy, then it does some pre-installation steps, does some installation steps. You don't really need to know all of this. You just need to know that this is the standard thing for deploying Windows clients. So right now, if you would just turn on your device and connect to this deployment share, you would be able to deploy it. You can try that actually in the Surface Hands-on Labs area. But let me show you the little changes that I recommend that we do. First one is right here in the pre-installation steps, there's one thing that says, let's inject the drivers. And right here it says, just choose from all the drivers that are loaded into MDT and install the drivers that match whatever is in this selection profile. This is definitely not what you want to do. So let's change this from all drivers to install nothing and install all drivers from this selection profile. So install everything from nothing. That means you're not installing drivers. But let me add one more step over here. So if I go to General, and I can go to Set Task Sequence Variable, we actually have a very interesting task sequence variable. And this task sequence variable is driver group 001. So now that I have driver group 001, I can use any order that I want. So I'm going to say, I want the driver group to match make, so percentage make percentage slash model. And I'm going to zoom in just after I stop typing. So here we go. This is what you want to have. Driver group 001, and say all we want is we want to make sure that you go look for drivers inside make slash model. Remember MS Info 32 that was Microsoft Corporation, and then we saw Surface 3? This is exactly how it will match. It will say, here's Surface 3 slash, here's Microsoft Corporation slash Surface 3. It will match this, and it will go look for drivers there and nowhere else. And that's exactly what we want. And you should not only do this for Surface devices, you should do this for all of your devices. You should make sure that you're filtering this. Because we work at Microsoft and we see support cases. And the support cases that come over with customers saying that the wrong driver was installed and it caused blue screens, that it caused issues, that doesn't happen just for Surface Pro 3, that happens for all devices. When you leave a pool of drivers for Windows to choose or for MDT to choose whatever he likes, sometimes you run into issues. Let's make sure we don't do that. So now I'm ready with this part. I'll later show you the other option. And then for the custom tasks, I need to add one more thing. Remember that I told you that we need to set the hibernation for those 4 hours? After 4 hours of connected standby, you go into hibernation? So we did the first step to resolve that. That was to add that package. Let's do the second step. And the second step is to just run a batch file that contains all of that, all of the commands that Windows needs to run to be successful with that. Let me show you what batch file it is. I have it here, and it's once again very well documented online. If you look for Surface Pro 3 hibernation, you'll find exactly these steps. So these are all power configuration steps. This is pretty much gibberish. What we're saying is let's just add some additional things to your power plan, to the power plan that you're using. And those additional things is if your device is on AC or on DC power, just go into hibernation after 4 hours of sleep. This is what it means. So now that I've copied this to this batch file, that is, it was literally copy-paste. I didn't do anything else. So now that I have this, all I want to do is I want to copy this batch file into my deployment share. And in my deployment share, let me open one more folder here. In my deployment share, I have a folder that is called scripts. So yeah, this is a script. Let me grab this. There we go. I can copy or move it or whatever suits me. And I'll call this hibernation, and actually not call the custom folder hibernation, but rather create a command line inside of that folder that is called hibernation or set hibernation, whatever you want. And the only thing that I'm going to say is set hibernation .bat. So right now, and let me fix this thing that I that I did some mistakes. Right now, we're all done. Right now, the device will automatically enter hibernation. The problem is that every device that you deploy using this task sequence will actually try to enter hibernation after 4 hours of sleep. That's not exactly what we want. So let's use that options tab that is right next to us. And once again, you have the lab manuals for this. You can use them on your own deployment to do all of those steps. I'm doing a sped up version, 25 minutes, but you'll see the full version by yourself. You can try it by yourself. So here, I clicked on the second tab that says Options, and I'm going to Add, and I'm going to say Task Sequence Variable. I'm going to use exactly the same variable that I've seen before. So what I'm going to say is percentage model percentage. So if the model and the default says exist, it's not if it exists, if it's equal to Surface Pro 3. So right now, what I'm saying is this thing only applies to Surface Pro 3. So see, model equals Surface Pro 3. And here's Windows. So I click OK. I have this, task sequence equals Surface 3. But the interesting thing is that I also want this to apply to Surface 3. Right now I have Surface Pro 3. Let's also apply it to Surface 3. So I'll do exactly the same step. Add task sequence variable. And once again is if the model equals Surface 3. And now I have the two of them. Actually, I should have avoided the percentage signs here. So now I have the two of them. But the problem is that this is an OR. This is actually an AND. This says if the model equals Surface Pro 3 and the model equals Surface 3. What I want to do is one or the other. So let me show you how we go from one and the other to one and the other. You go to the if statement, and you say if any of the conditions are met. So instead of all conditions, you go to any conditions. OK? There we go. Press OK. OK here. Right-click the deployment share. Click Update to deployment share. Next. Next. Ready to go. Task sequence is completely optimized for Surface Pro 3 and Surface 3, and you'll get the device deployed with all the goodies that you would expect from the optimized Microsoft version. How easy was that? Thank you. Thank you very much. If the 4 hours are configurable, unfortunately not. The 4 hours is the default behavior. Like Brett said before, we're listening to feedback. If we see a lot of requests to make it configurable, we may work with our buddies in Windows and try to make it configurable. But it requires some effort, so we need to hear from you first before we make that option available. So this was the deployment demo that I had prepared for you. Let me talk about the MSI. I briefly touched this topic when I showed you the web page, and I said there is a big MSI that contains all the drivers and all the firmware and everything else. We wanted to make the fact that you will benefit from deploying drivers and from deploying firmware updates to your devices. We want to make it as easy as possible. And what we know is that all of you, no matter what deployment infrastructure you're using, one thing that you all know how to do is deploy an MSI. That's the easiest thing. It's installing one application. So if everyone knows how to deploy an MSI, this is the way to go. And what we have is we supply the deployment drivers. We have all the drivers for Surface Pro 3 and for Surface 3 in the corresponding MSIs. Plus, we filter it out. So if you send that MSI to your entire infrastructure, which we don't usually recommend, it will still apply only to Surface 3 and to Surface Pro 3, depending on which MSI you're pushing out. It also improves the device reliability and performance. Brett told you, we don't like having to create new drivers constantly, creating new UEFI updates, creating new things like that. It requires a lot of testing. It requires a lot of hours, a lot of manpower from our side. But when we see that something needs to be fixed, we push it out. So if you guys also push it out, whenever you see a new MSI, which is about once a month, when you see an MSI, if you push it out, your devices will be greatly improved every single time. We can guarantee you that. We can guarantee that your devices are going to be improved every time that you push out the MSI. The MSI. Go ahead. That's an excellent question. Okay, let me repeat the question. The UFI, there are two questions here, actually. The first question is whether the firmware tool, the one that allows you to change the UFI settings, whether that's included inside of the same MSI. No, it's not, because some customers prefer not to deploy those ones, prefer not to have the UFI centrally manageable. But when you do, so now you have two MSIs that you can deploy if you want to do both management and optimizing your devices. So when you do deploy the Surface firmware tool, the one that allows you to manage the UFI from within the OS, then you can centrally manage them. You can run through a PowerShell command, an easy one. Also, once again, very well documented on TechNet and also on a blog, a great blog that has a lot of things for Surface, that is AskPFE Platforms. You'll see AskPFE Platforms has a lot of Surface content, and it has specifically some PowerShell scripts that you can easily leverage to do all of this UFI management. And it also delivers new features. This MSI also delivers new features, like the advanced device security that Brett was talking about. The advanced device security that allows you to block your cameras, to block your SD card, to disable Wi-Fi, disable Bluetooth on your devices. Like anything that the most security conscious customers, the most sensitive, and sometimes even governmental organizations that are very sensitive to those kinds of things, those are all available to you within the advanced security features. Plus, you have an added bonus. That is, if you download this MSI, it can use any of the commands that are usually available to you for any other MSI. One of them is to extract the packets. So if you download this, you can choose to also download the zip file that we just imported into MDT, or you can choose not to. You can extract the MSI and get all the files, all the drivers, all the firmware updates, just like you would get from the zip file. This makes it much, much easier. And now we have Milad, my colleague here, that is going to talk to you about the future. What's there in store for us with Windows 10 and with these devices?
All right. Okay. So now I will talk about currently the future. And with the future specifically around Windows 10 and the impact it will have to Surface. So first of all, hands off. How many of you are evaluating Windows 10 already? Wow, that's quite a lot. That's around 70% of the room. So all of you are insiders. That's great. So one of the things with Windows 10 is, I think, we try to address lots of new challenges. Lots of buzzwords are around the place. BYOD, CYOD, so bring your own device, choose your own device. The whole conversation on consumerization of IT. Our executives are talking about it, they want to make it happen, and we as IT Pro have the task to make it happen. So what happened with Windows 10, what I say is Windows, or let's say Microsoft, has learned a lot from smartphones. So the way smartphones are managed. As you know, with smartphones, you always had the capability of provisioning certain configurations. You could provision and say, this is how connection works. This is how, if MMS is enabled or disabled. Windows, or let's say big Windows for Surface, has learned a lot about that. And we will announce, actually now, with my conversation here, there is a new feature in Windows 10 called runtime provisioning, which will make it happen for big Windows. So you will be able to change configurations during runtime, and you don't actually need to deploy custom images anymore. You can use a Surface, which you get from the retail, and then just deploy provisioning packages to that device and make it enterprise ready. You can send a provisioning package to make a domain join. You can even change the SKU. So let's say you buy a new device, a Surface 3 today. You get to go to the office and say, you know what, I want to make this part of my environment, but the requirement for that is to be an enterprise SKU, IT can send a package, which is a couple of kilobytes big, to that device and transition that from Windows 8 Pro to Windows 10 Enterprise. Oh, no, so from Windows 10 Pro to Windows 10 Enterprise. And I'm going to show you how that works. In order to make that possible, Windows team has created a new tool. It's called Windows Image and Configuration Designer, short WICKED. Pretty cool. Apparently there were some legal issues with that, so it's now ICD. Pretty lame. But as IT Pro, we continue with WICKED, let's say. Probably after the session, Windows will come to me and complain that I said that. But that's fine because I'm a Surface. And as long as my manager is happy, I'm happy as well. OK, so how about I show you guys that tool in action? You want that? Yeah! You know, I like that, yeah. Let me give you some cool stuff. That's yours. I'm going to continue while you're grabbing that. Enjoy your Surface mouse. And by the way, nobody said that before, like Brad and Joa, but we got more stuff, including a Surface Pro 3. Which I will take and give my mother. Why? She's using an iPad, and I thought I'd give it her a Surface Pro. No? All right, just kidding. It's for you guys. So the person who will be able, after this session, recaps this session, will get the Surface Pro 3. OK? And then we got mouse, T-shirts, and all that cool stuff. OK, let me show you how that looks like. Let's see. Number 8. Actually, no, it's 7. OK, so this is Surface 3 with LTE. I'm looking at my boss. I still have the job? Cool. OK. Yeah, this is a Surface 3 with LTE, which will be later available, not now. It's just blue screened. That's why it's not available at this point. OK? So what I will do now is, after the session, I will open a bug, and we have an engineering team, like Brett mentioned. We will resolve this, and when we ship the product, that you guys have a better experience than I have right now. OK, so I'm booting the Surface 3 up again. The skin. Yeah. So yeah, who knows about the Ninja Cat on a flying unicorn? A couple of people? Yeah. OK, so what happens with that while this boots? Basically, on Friday afternoon, I was like, how do we identify our engineering devices? And everybody was like, yeah, you can put like a tape on it. I was like, that's kind of boring. So we went to our friends in the secret labs and said, you know, we would be really, really happy if you could create us a skin. And they were like, no, we don't have time. I was like, please, no, please, no, please, no. I have the skins. OK, so yeah, that's the story with that. Unfortunately, it's not for sale. Yes. But we do have some good swag. OK, so that's my Surface 3 with LTE, with Godzilla protecting it to ensure that nobody steals it from me, because otherwise I lose my job. And I'm going to start WICKED, ICD, I mean, for those from Windows in the room. OK, so ICD is very simplified, and it's in the UI. And essentially what it does is you can either create provisioning packages, or you could even create images. What I want to show you is provisioning packages. So I hit on new provisioning package. I define the project name. Let's do actually from Pro to Enterprise. Hit Next. Now I can define which Windows edition this provisioning package applies to. You can say it's available for all Windows editions, for Windows Mobile, and even for Project Athens, which is Windows Internet of Things. Told you it's an experimental build. I had to get actually approval to show you that build from them. OK, hit Next. If I want to edit an existing provisioning package, I could import it here so I can continue working on that. I hit finish. It loads the settings. Yeah, the UI is still not done, as you can see. 1 second, it will come eventually. Experimental still. Yeah, now it's here. Okay, so what are the settings I have available? So I mentioned you can do a domain join. So all you have to do is actually go here, computer account, and you define the domain and the domain name, the password, username, and so on, how you want to perform the domain join. You can create new user accounts. You can deploy your own certificates to that device, run command line connection profiles. If you have LTE devices, like the Surface 3 with LTE later on, then you can do that as well. Yes, sir. Come again? So the question is, does this replace Workbench, so Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, essentially? The answer is no. Actually, at the end, I will explain you guys when to use which tool. I know it looks very confusing now because you have like System Center Configuration Manager, you got Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, you got now ICD, and some command line stuff. I will explain how and which industry should use what. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to do an edition upgrade. Okay, so here I have the possibility to enter a product key. Now that was a tricky one because when I said to Windows, hey, I really want to show this, and they were like, yeah, sure, what do you want to demo? I said enterprise upgrade. And they were like, yeah, which serial number are you going to show, like everybody? So I got one. Don't take pictures. No. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so let me copy this one. Put it up here. Let me delete that one. I don't want to do a domain join. Okay. And then, of course, you could say, I don't know, disable camera, disable location services. And the cool thing about this, even if you use this local admin, they can't tamper with it. Okay. So what next? Export, provisioning package, define a package name. And then you have two settings available. Package owner, as well as the package rank. Now, depending on who you are, if you're an OEM, you will go for OEMs and system integrator and so on. It's just a matter of how the provisioning packages are getting applied in case you use them during deployment, for example. Okay? And then the package rank is the value which determines the priority of that package. Okay, so I leave it with default OEM 0 in that case. But next. Now, if you configure sensitive settings, where you, for example, enter a password, well, probably like today, you want to encrypt that package then, right? You don't want necessarily that by accident you lose your package and then everybody knows, I don't know, the Wi-Fi credentials of your environment. You don't want that. So you can say enable package encryption, and it will generate a password, which you then need to provide on top of that to the end user so he can run that. For me, hey, I trust this serial number will work, and I think at the end now everybody has that serial number, so I hit next. I define the output location. Let's put that on the desktop. And upgrade. Save it. Next. Build. That's done. Oh. Yes. Okay. So now I have my provisioning package. Now, in theory, I could use Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, System Center Configuration Manager, you name it, in order to get that package to the user. Or maybe in the future, you will have a SharePoint website, like a welcome page, where every new employee can go, and they see, oh, that's my provisioning package, and double-click, and it starts using it. So now, cross-finger, because that's an experimental build of Windows. I hit OK. It will ask me if I'm really sure that I want to run this provisioning package, because maybe I'm not sure where it came from. And now, everybody cross-finger. Yes, add. And the upgrade process just started from Windows 10 Professional to Windows 10 Enterprise. So, So that's just one quick example of ICD. And we really work a lot with the folks who develop this in order to make sure that this is a great experience on Surface, because our commitment as an organization of Microsoft, we say we want to provide the best-in-class Windows experience and showcase what the platform can do. Yes? So ICD will run on any device which runs Windows 10, and as Brett said, Surface Pro 1, 2, 3, Surface 3 will all be upgradable to Windows 10. Come again? So essentially what it does is it performs an anytime upgrade. So it will grab it from the internet, the required changes. So right now it's actually saying working on updates. It's grabbing the updates. So now to your question, when to use what? Because it got confusing when you don't know what to do. So if you're a small organization and you don't have expertise in Microsoft Deployment Toolkit and necessarily you don't want to invest into System Center, that's where you use ICD in order to get started. You can create a full image media as well as those provisioning packages which I just showed. Now, if you're a mid-size or large organization, you're going to continue, well, we recommend you to use Microsoft Deployment Toolkit or System Center Configuration Manager in order to create and deploy custom images. Now, what's new, if you already deployed that image, then you want to use ICD in order to create those provisioning packages, which you then can deploy over the best way which suits your existing environment. So you can use System Center, Configuration Manager, MDT. You can use Microsoft Intune, right? Or any other third-party manageability tool. So it's all compatible with that. So that's the recommendation for it. Okay? Cool. So what about this? Who wants to come on stage? Okay, so who wants to come on stage and recap the session for me? And get the Surface? Okay, yes, sir. He just stand up already. Don't worry, we get something cool for you as well. Okay, so a cage fight. Oh my God. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Come here.
All right, come here.
Wait, I need to see. Whoa, careful. Okay, so take this and have fun recapping the session.
Okay, so the real session report is ICD is cool, you should all use it.
Yeah, no.
No?
So what did Brett talk about?
Brett talked about, let's see, that was the beginning, and it was,
The beginning, like the director who was here,
right,
my manager.
your boss.
Yeah, it's my boss.
So you should look good.
Yeah, oh, yeah, please.
See, he talked about the Surface 3 and deploying it in the enterprise.
Yes.
And that was an hour ago.
Yeah. Come on! Yeah. So I get you something else, yeah? Oh!
So Brett, who is the lead who actually started this whole project, talked about how great the Surface Pro 3 is and how he listened to us, the IT people, to bring the Surface Pro into the enterprise environment. That's how he started off. Then he went in to say, by listening to the end users, how he's made packages available to us, and it's important to apply the packages to make it easier for deployment and also for the end user. And also talking about the UEFI and about those functionalities there to we're able to apply those for the end user.
Very good. Now, Joao.
Joel talked about where are we at today with the Surface Pro 3, talking about the capabilities that we're able to use, and also gave the examples of being able to use the packages to be able to deploy them. Then you came along and talked about where are we going for tomorrow by examining Windows 10 and how you can actually use the package there and also applying which one applies to small organization, medium, or large organizations. And you show how easy it is, and even were able to show us even though you had a blue screen.
All right. So with that, we are open for Q&A, and we still have lots of swag, by the way. So also some hardware, smaller ones. We run out of budget. Marketing gave a couple of already out. So, okay, Q&A, and then I think Brad and Joao, you can come back here and cover me as well. All right, yes, please. Yeah, and if you guys can come to the mics, that will be the easiest, I think.
So I come from Bay Area, San Francisco, Stanford University, go Cardinals. We have just started deploying Surface Pro 3s in our environment, first department at Stanford, and we are doing it on a pretty large scale. So we've already worked with Microsoft to design or come up with a department-specific image and started deploying Windows 8.1 with the Surface Pro 3. So we've started to notice a lot of good things, obviously, coming out of this hardware, but we also noticed some feedback that you guys would take back and hopefully fix and have some iterations in the future. For example, the docking station has a lock, but it doesn't lock the Surface, so it's useless, right? We definitely want to hear more about dual screen support. Right now, we are running the dual screens using the MDT hub, which can be iffy. Running it from a USB 3.0 to power the second screen, or even doing the daisy chaining doesn't work for the older monitors. So,
yeah, I think those are a couple of questions you have combined to one big one. So here's the thing: I give you my business card, okay? You send me a summary of all your questions, and then we take that offline.
sounds good.
And then we got a nice, what is that? Oh, wireless display adapter for you.
Next question there in the back.
Just as it pertains to like things, kind of on the same note as him, pertaining to hardware, we have a lot of users that do utilize the docking stations and the adapters and some of the surface covers. And in deploying some images versus like the stock image surfaces, we run into a lot of issues with the accessories on devices where we've deployed the image versus devices where we haven't. So I was really, really curious what the easiest and most expedient way to get you guys that information. And also I was really curious if you were aware of that being a differentiator, or if you guys have seen anything that pertains to that in your experience.
That's an excellent point. So if I understand the question correctly, what you're seeing is that when you deploy your custom image to the devices run into issues that they didn't run into before.
Correct.
The main point for that is that's usually related to drivers. And so if you make sure that you filter the drivers like I showed here and like you have documented in many different places online, that's the very first step that you should do. Otherwise, you can always deploy the MSI, that I talked about for such a long time, and that MSI will make sure that you have the correct drivers. The second part of your question was about what's the best way to get that information to us when you still run into those issues, so that we can fix it on our side, so that we can make sure that we test your infrastructure, that we have the same components that you have in-house, that we have the same install base in our side, in our labs. And the answer for that is just open a support case. There's many different ways for opening a support case. If you're a Premier customer, you can contact your technical account manager. If you're not a Premier customer, you can still open a case with Microsoft. If it turns out to be a bug on our side, you don't pay anything for the support case, but in any solution, we always get that information, and we always work towards getting that infrastructure replicated on our side, on our lab.
Yeah, and I just to add on that, I know it sounds sometimes bad if engineering say you should contact support. Now, I thought about that as well before I joined engineering. But actually what happens, so Brad's second team, post-launch engineering, they're meeting every second day and discuss all the bugs which the support team is submitting to us, okay? So it's actually, okay, so this customer had this issue, these are the repro steps, let's fix it, right? And then Brett's team takes care of it and makes it available. So that's another reason why you need to update your drivers and firmware.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, it was just a weird question.
Yeah, and you should come over. We have some stuff for you. Yes.
So, two questions real quick. The process that you went through for filtering drivers and what you were showing in MDT, is that exactly what they're going to take you through in the hands-on demo as far as how you filter drivers, how you set those up? And if you can't make it to the hands-on demo, where's the best place to kind of get that step-by-step process? And then real quick, the second question, is there anything specific for Pixie Boot that is causing issues? Because I know for our organization, we can't get a Surface to Pixie Boot to save our lives. And I don't know if it has to do with the way that we've got MDT set up or not.
Okay. So the first question was about the hands-on labs. We have 3 hands-on labs available. One is deploying Windows 8.1 on Surface 3 and Surface Pro 3. Then we have the same deployment lab, but for Windows 10. And then we have an upgrade lab, so from Windows 8.1 to Windows 10. Okay, so and then you can see exactly what Joa showed. You can do it yourself there. Okay, and then the second one was that you experienced some technical difficulties around Pixie Boot. We continue to update. So in case you did not update yet, we recommend to update those devices. We just continue improving it. What I saw lots of time happening, and I had 2 more people giving me the same feedback. It's kind of difficult to volume down, power on. So actually with the latest update with 7.6.0, which we shipped, I think, was it last month, Brett? Last month, we introduced some modification to the boot process, which means when you now define the boot order in UEFI, saying network, USB, SSD, it will do Pixie Boot for you every time you boot. You don't need to do volume down, power on anymore.
You're also only able to Pixie Boot with the Surface Ethernet adapter. Only the Surface Ethernet adapter will boot it, or the dock.
Let's get the question from there.
Another one on peripherals, which can soon exceed the cost of the Surface Pro itself. So what are you doing to keep us, well, unlike another competing vendor who produces a different video type of connector and with each version of their product, how are you going to help us preserve our investment in all the peripherals and the Surface Pro 4, 5, and 6 and all that?
That is definitely our goal. We plan on going in that direction. One thing that you'll notice is that that you may have noticed, is that we have a different connector on Surface Pro 3 and another one on Surface 3. The reason is that Surface 3 consumes less power than Surface Pro 3, a lot less power. So because of that, we wanted to give you the flexibility of charging over micro USB, the same charger that you can use for your phone. We wanted to give you that flexibility. On Surface Pro 3, we have what we call the SurfLink connector. That's magnetic connector that connects to the side, and that's the path forward. That's what we hope to preserve on our path forward.
Great. Thanks.
My pleasure. Mouse?
Hi there. I was wondering.
Welcome back. I remember you.
Yes, the Surface install, the Surface app.
Yes.
I was wondering, is there any plans to make it configurable as to what the button does? In our organization, we deal mostly with documents, so I may prefer to provision it so that it would, instead of launching Notebook, which is really great and seems intuitive, maybe be able to launch Word with it or launch Excel with it.
Okay, so that's actually very good feedback. First time, no, again, that's something you hear all the time. Oh, first time we hear about that. But this is really first time we hear about that. So I was the one to make it happen with the Surface app on the Microsoft Download Center. If I give you my business cards, if you can write me the scenario you want to cover, I can at least discuss it with the partners which are responsible for the app and feed that feedback into.
Great, thank you.
You have this quick question. Do you have plans to address data recovery, sensitive data recovery? Come over here.
Where is this?
Sensitive data recovery for non-bootable devices. So in our enterprise, sensitive data already BitLocker encrypted on the Surface. Have scenarios where I either need to recover data off the device before I send it to you for replacement or repair, or I need to destroy the data. So are you guys maturing some plans to work with enterprises in that regard?
Okay. I can take this question. So the question, if I understood it correctly, is that you want to be able to recover data off of the devices before sending the device for being replaced. So if your device has a cracked screen, if your device has any sort of issue, and you want to replace it within warranty or outside of warranty, but still need to get the data out of it. One of the tools that we make available, not specifically the Surface team, but Windows has, is called DARTS. That is Diagnostics and Recovery Toolsets. It allows you to go into your disk of the machine that is crashed and recover that data. There's also a lot of third-party solutions that will help you get the data out of there. It may be easier or more challenging depending on the tools, depending on what you've licensed and what you haven't licensed in your organization. There's nothing specifically for that purpose in the Surface team,
Okay.
At least not right now.
I was referring specifically to a device that is non-bootable, and that would be in a conventional scenario, I would remove the drive and then use some other mechanism to extract the data. So it becomes a scenario where do I have to destroy the device in order to get my data? And that's kind of, I mean, obviously if I can remotely connect to the device or boot the device to some other media in order to extract the data, that's not really an issue. The scenario is I can't get to the drive, I have to extract the drive. So.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Right now we don't have anything to offer you, but we're looking into a lot of different options to accomplish that scenario and several others.
Yeah, and I just talked with my manager, and I'm looking into that right now. So it's the feedback you provide, I hear it a couple of times from different companies saying, before we return units, we really want to make sure that the data on the device is erased, okay? Even if maybe it's disk encrypted and all that, BitLocker or whatever. I'm looking into that, right? If you can give me more details on your scenario, I can feed that into my product development.
Okay, thank you.
And you should come here because we have swag for you. And by the way, you all know that tonight is our party, right? Surface party? How many know about it? Hands up. Still so many don't know about it. Okay, so there are wristbands here. Those are your entries, right? For those who don't know about it. And then if we probably run out of them, you come to the Surface booth as well. We have more of them.
So we have a long line here. Question?
It's not on. So the button question was my first question. So I want to get the card about that. But the other question I had was really around, Brett, you kind of hinted to it earlier that you could maybe go into why LTE is so tough.
We can talk about that.
We'll answer that and many more questions here offline. Thank you very much for attending. This session was great. We're going to hang around for a bit. Feel free to come and join us and ask us the questions that you still have remaining. Thank you very much.